looking at it from, you guys are just optimization people. That really starts changing when you set the narrative ahead of time as well. I think when we talk about limits and when we talk about the centralized FinOps team,
Yes.
Oftentimes, especially in large enterprises, there's always this conflict of we need more people.
Yes.
Because on paper, the centralized FinOps team should be focused on, say, implementing the cost controls, the governance, some level of getting the right data to the right people, be it through, reports, dashboards, you name it. But yet, oftentimes, what I found was that the centralized team is doing the consulting I was describing. That
Yes.
a team needs help, right? They're like, I saw the report, I got a D-, and I need to fix it, and I'm coming in and I need help. And I find that, especially when it comes towards a level of these optimizations and efficiency we're describing, automation might be the only way to get there.
Yes.
Right? Automation is a scary word for a lot of large enterprises because I think the fear is always that if I enable some automation and it brings out my production environment, and again, it's not nefarious. It might be that we tagged production wrong. We said it was dev. The policy was too permissive, and they found, leakages and said, the budget is set, and the hard stop is here. Shut off the lights in the middle of the night. Whatever. When there's another tool automating, it freaks a lot of people out.
Yes, it does. But at the same time, I agree with you. Automation is the only way. And the way I see this kind of approach, which I think we can finally use for good use, crawl, walk, run, is to say you should have a set of policies which are the crawl state. And they need to be implemented. They are valid for absolutely everything. They are the basic best practices, okay? So it's the S3 should have some tiering enabled somewhere. You should not use GPT-2 unless you have something very specific, or all those kind of things. And we should have a collection which is defined of saying this is what everyone needs to be doing. And then you have the walk. So the walk one can only be applied when you've done the crawl ones.
Right.
And the walk one are going to be specific to in some way your industry. Okay, it might be we're talking about banking. It's going to be, you need to use encryption with our own keys, or you are in a startup. It's something different, but it is specific to your industry. And then you have the run, which is specific to your company. And I think it's a hierarchical approach to think. And so you start by saying, well, we're going to have those crawl policies. We're going to make sure they're all embedded, they're all working, it's all going fine. Then you move to the walk one. What are the things we need to specialize from what we have in the crawl so that it matches our requirements, but quite big.
Right.
And then you go to the next level. And I really do think that this hierarchy is what you need. I see it as for policies. This is the hierarchy for policies. I see you have two things. You have hierarchy from the with levels. Mm-hmm. And so this is what I'm just talking about. And then you also have some sort of layers. For each level, you have layers because you have security policies and you have FinOps policies and you have tech policies. And these need to be they're going to be layers that are going to sit one on top of another, and they're going to create that level.
Totally. The policy thing is interesting because you assume that for security, or if you're writing Terraform code, S3 bucket's a great example. It should not be unencrypted.
Yes.
It should have a VPC endpoint, all the security policies that are well thought out and written. And as an engineer, it's almost easier because you assume that, I won't be able to apply this anyway. I can't deploy an unencrypted bucket, so it's a catch-all. Right? There's a little bit of safety net. Obviously, Every engineer should think about security as a top-level concern. When you get into FinOps, I find that in large enterprises, you have this centralized team in charge of writing these policies. Well, first you got to find, you have some type of engineering effort on your team. It's not just analyst. And then you have to plug into existing places, right? So should you interact with the security team and say, hey, can we piggyback off your policy engine? Add a couple of our own as well, right? So the complexity of making sure that shifting left in FinOps in an enterprise, it's not just advisory. It's not just a nice to have, but it's thought through to your point of what is a crawl policy, right? And how do we make sure that there's an exception process as well?
Yes.
Right, it might be that the most expensive chip right now with NVIDIA, we want to limit this to only 2 teams because they're the center of excellence for AI. They did some work, great. And now we're ready to launch it, internal tools, and then to production for external users. Launch fails because policy said, hey, only one team can use these GPUs.
Yes.
No one remembered to let the FinOps team know, hey, by the way, this is going live. And so if you have all these policies that are sitting there that are almost like very specific for use cases, when the change happens, it's just another ticket that comes down to FinOps saying, hey, why is this blocked? You guys have to fix it immediately.
Yes.
And it's again, this attention of the centralized team does not know the context of what's being deployed and why. All they can really do is give you tools that show you, right? And give you some recommendations. But around the automation side especially, I find that being able to do a crawl, walk, run again makes a lot of sense there as well. An example I can think of is, say, Kubernetes, right?
Mm-hmm.
On one level, we went from VMs, which were fixed in sizes. Some people restarted them, but majority of the time, it's like, look, it's running 24/7. Kubernetes, now you can scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can scale like elastically. And yet a lot of the policies that would be there would be saying that are really focused on node level, right? Hey, you should use this type of node, preferably. Maybe non-prod, use spot instances primarily. And the last one is on demand.
Yep.
In production, it might be flipped. We don't want spot instances because whatever, valid concerns. And yet there's something that happens often where engineers saying, okay, I can use this node, right? But there's also deeper layers to it, right? As an engineer, you're still worried about, okay, I can use this type of instance, but I still have to configure each individual microservice or app to now leverage the right amount of compute and CPU. I may do this one time up front as a performance test, I set it, and then it stays that way. And when you set something like that, again, as an engineer, I empathize that my number one concern is that apps shouldn't go down, yes. Right? I don't want to be all of a sudden out of memory issues because
Absolutely.
I was trying to save money,
yes,
right? I was trying to be doing the right thing and knowing where that gap should be, right? What is the extra fat on top of it that I should add? And continuously monitoring that and adding it, but that automation just becomes impossible, right? Especially at scale, you have thousands of developers who are working, and with AI, we're coding faster and shipping faster and faster. The infrastructure side, the true promise of cloud is that you're getting the right compute when you need it.
Yep.
And yet oftentimes to get there, it requires a lot of work ahead of time, right? And so I think automation is really the only way to get there often.
I think what I think is we are highlighting there lots is coordination is the complex thing, especially in big enterprises. When you start, you have, you say, the security team, which is big. The FinOps team, I agree, is going to be focusing on coordination, but it's a really hard coordination because we coordinate lots of people and there is nothing standard. In security, what I like is that you have, hey, NIST is setting you, this is the thing you need to follow. You don't really have such a prescriptive thing that will force you to do FinOps in a certain way. The risk also is that you kill in some form or way some of the flexibility that you can gain. But the interesting thing is that security, everyone agrees, is top priority. So even cloud vendors, if you want, security is extremely clear, tightened, complex to set up. But on the FinOps, it's not that much. We allow you to see what are the prices and then do some calculation on them, but there is no really easy enforcement. So if you as a team are going to set up policies, run policies, it's your job as of now to decide what are these policies and to coordinate to make sure that you are not blocking something that is important. Security, I would say, it's almost baked in at the moment. It is when you move your things from test and dev to prod, yes, you move security, or it's the other way around. There is the security of prod, and we're going to bring it back to test and dev so we can simulate it, because that's where in staging I used to simulate all the security things. We don't have that equivalent there. And I think, as you correctly say also, is if we start having policy tools for each element, it's going to be for each specialty. Should we piggyback on someone else? I don't know.
There's a convergence that happens. I think at its core, it's cloud management.
Yes.
Right. And cloud management has many different lenses on it: security, elasticity, performance, FinOps. And yet, the more tools that we keep adding, oftentimes I feel like the conflict that might happen of, we have a policy that says X, but the security policy is conflicting with it, and vice versa. So you get this tangled mess of things, right? But often I feel like the core, you touched on something really important, the idea of the cultural practice for describing FinOps. And every time I go to FinOpsX in the hallways, the first time I went, I thought it would be a lot of people talking about interesting ways they've done efficiency.
Yes.
Right? Because at one level, you're hearing from the top down, we care about optimization first and foremost. People who don't know FinOps think, well, you are here to lower my bill,
yes.
right? And so there's a pressure up there, the room gets it. And yet downstream, somewhere along the line, it's getting lost. And when you talk to procurement or product, again, it's almost a level of frustration because they don't get the language, right? They're like, look, I also want to be, if you sat everyone in a room and you say, oh, raise your hand if you want to use cloud in the most efficient way possible, who's against it? No one's going to raise their hand, right? And yet when you go to the procurement team, the only time they might get involved is when the PPA renewal is coming up. They go to the IT director who goes to the FinOps guy, says, what should we look at for next year, right? Oh, well, based on current trends, it should be 39 million. You go to the CFO, say, absolutely not. It's going to be 25 million. No chance, right? The budget cannot handle that. And so, especially if you're not a technology first company, right? If your main product is not purely SaaS, B2B or B2C, it's very hard for these other profiles to really understand the elasticity of cloud. It's a good thing. The budget that breaks every week, but the budget also can be underneath. Right? We often only look at elasticity as a negative. Cost spike happened, breach occurred, procurement has to come back in and pay for overages, on and on. But we never really celebrate, but on the weekends we can now scale down to zero. We don't have to pay, right? And I think that complexity sometimes really frustrates a lot of these other personas.
Yes.
Because when they go to the FinOps team, right, and this is where I think a lot of shift up is happening. You go to the FinOps team and they're like, the effectiveness of the savings plan is 82%. We're good. And they're like, I don't even know what that means.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Is that, they're like, so we're okay, but the CFO still wants to lower the bill. You're like, but we're fully covered. We do spot instances for ephemeral environments. Okay, but I don't know what that means.
Yes, right? And even it's so what you would be telling me is that the good old ways of potentially throwing more money at the problem to get it low, to get the overall spend lower, is not going to work. It's that there is a limit on how much optimization you can do. And yes, you can go and really be super efficient, but then it's going to be peanuts compared to the rest.
Right.
So I think that's a very interesting concept of saying, at one point, there is a real limit of what FinOps can do from the efficiency perspective. Even if everyone wanted to do everything, and so you just send your recommendation, they're done immediately, everything's done, you still have a limit. And investors always want lower and whatever is achieved. You want to progress every year. That's one of the things you always want in theory is to, when you are in procurement, they renegotiate contracts every 3 years, but not for the worst, always for the better. You say, hey, you're my provider. You should, after 3 years, you should be better at doing your stuff. And I think you brought, as usual, lots of really good thoughts there, but there is a fight for, I think, power. There is a power struggle that we don't really acknowledge much, but almost in cloud, almost all the power is now with engineers. They never asked for it. The cloud was designed in some form or way for this, but that has removed some levers for others, and they were expert into that. When I studied ages ago procurement, one of the things that was highlighted for me was for every dollar you remove by negotiating for a better discount, that goes directly to the bottom line. That is net profit.
Right.
And so if you are people that can manage really big increase in net profit, which by the way is something that investors are going to look all over the place, that's the metric. With cloud, you can't, because you can't really negotiate you can negotiate up to a certain level, but then you're blocked. So I think there is a big part of frustration of the fact that people which are used to work in a way, I'm consuming more. What do I get as a discount? Which we all have at home. Okay, I'm buying 5 pounds of milk. Can I get a 10% discount on all of that? In this case, you can't. And so, I do think you've touched onto something that is worth then digging, maybe not on this episode, but another one, which is about this power struggle and how cloud has removed power from some people, and how we should be redistributing that power, and how usually engineers don't want, in my opinion, that power at all.
Yeah, it's almost implied, right? If you're a product person and you do your testing, you say, we're going to launch a new product, new feature, new product, whatever. And the first question you ask, as you might already thinking about cost because you get it and you understand that, the ROI has to be worth it to invest in this. And oftentimes you go to the engineer and if they come back with an estimate that says $1,000 per X, you kind of have to take their word for it, right? Yes. There's no quantifiable way to deterministically say, no, the way you've structured this, if you're a product person, how do you talk to an engineer to say, you say 1,000, but I'm pretty sure it can be 600, right, per blah, and not figure it out. And so the alternative might be you give them a constraint up front. You say, can we build this product for under, say, $1,000, $600, or whatever? If they say no, right, what do you say? Or
exactly.
There's no quantifiable, without doing some work ahead of time. Obviously, I'm not saying it's not possible, but out of the box, you don't get this deterministic view that says you are X% efficient. Say you're 80% there. And to get the last 20%, it's going to require an inordinate amount of work. Yes. And so you're comfortable with it. It's like, we're okay being 80%, and the rest of it, we're going to spend our energy and resources to create more value for the company. Because that last 20 cents might take a year to re-architect our entire platform. Without that number, I feel like the reason CFOs, CIOs, CXOs are always looking at cloud costs as a number that has to go down, well, I feel like it's a learned behavior because every time you go to the CTO, the IT director, magically, they find savings.
Yes.
It's like Grand Theft Auto. You go to someone, money just comes out. And so eventually I think you start to erode trust a little bit that, but I've never gone to them and they've said, there's nothing more we can do. Because then I might have an outside consultant come in. They're like, oh, of course, there's so many things you can do.
Absolutely.
There's so many blah, blah, blah. And the engineers are now almost so defensive, right? Because you have to quantify, we can't do that because X, Y, and Z technical reasons that the FinOps person doesn't understand, the product person doesn't understand. All they're seeing is a dashboard that says you're inefficient.
Yes.
Right? And so oftentimes this level of trust that you could have on-prem that said, well, the CapEx cost is this much, this is our budget, this is your constraint, we physically can't buy more hardware this year, and figure it out. In cloud, we know that doesn't exist, we know it's elastic, and we know it's continuously shifting.
Yep.
So I feel like this lack of the language between these teams is causing a lack of trust, especially when it comes to optimization recommendations. So naturally, if I was a CFO, I would say the bill has to be lower. And
yes.
But we already did so much. The bill has to be lower, no matter what.
Yeah,
right?
Just as find a way.
Yeah.
But yes, I totally agree. I remember when I was managing things like this, when I was managing hundreds of servers, and one of the things is, you knew vaguely how much one server would be able to manage in customers. How many transactions per second can you do with these kind of servers? And you bought 40 of these because you need whatever amount. And even at the end, usually the progression was you would move from being an engineer to a solution architect, and potentially then you'll have have a complete product control under you, or advising the product people. You would know what were the parameters. And I think you're absolutely correct of saying this is not there anymore. And there are so many technologies you can use that it doesn't make sense. And that's what I continue to think we need to bring back. That top down is we need to bring back decisions, risk rewards to the CFO, because the answer to the CFO or the CIO is to say, yes, we either do A, we are going to find another 10% reduction. This is going to require us to do A, B, C, D, this amount of engineers per hour. We're going to reorganize this. Or option B, we're going to continue full speed on our product because we can deliver more, but it's going to be inefficient as before. So yes, the costs are going to rise. Which one do we do?
Right.
And I think that's what's missing today is we don't bring back those decisions to the decision makers.
I feel like the decision would be, we want both.
Yes, right? I'm pretty sure you want both, but
yeah, and it's funny. Ideally, I think everything we're describing is almost that FinOps should be embedded, a flavor of FinOps, not the full package of 26 capabilities, scopes, and everything else. That's important, but I think for example, for the CFO or the CIO, what does FinOps mean to them? What are the levers and metrics they should care about?
Yes.
And almost like educating the procurement team, the product team, this is the flavor of FinOps that should be aligned towards you. I think it's part of the centralized FinOps team, right? I think especially in large organizations, you are essentially selling the idea that with this data, that's, mountain of data you're getting every 2 hours or a day, we don't have to look at it once a month. We don't have to get heartburn over it. We can leverage this to make better decisions.
Yep.
And the types of decisions you can do if you're in product can be that, can we set up an alert that says, if any PR is going to raise a unit price for this service, more than 10% requires a level 2 approval. That is not just some engineering manager.
Yes.
Right? For the product team, if this new feature that we, as a gate, it has to be tested in non-prod in a way that's quantifiable for the volume we're expecting. Right? And that is now the lever setup. Yes. Right? For CFOs, it might be education about what do you really care about? To your point, the mandate coming from the top might be accelerate at all costs on AI front. We'll deal with the costs later.
Yes.
Within reason.
Yeah.
And if you ever get to this level where you have confidence that it's going to exceed, that's when you let us know.
Yes.
And we'll have buy-in from them that it's not going to be too bad, figure it out, right? The budget's set. But the flexibility required to leverage cloud is not just on the engineering side. The flexibility is also all the different systems that people are used to where money is a fixed amount that's spent, right? And so oftentimes the conversation, all of it just stalls there immediately, that you go to them, anyone who's in charge, and you say, well, I need more budget. Oftentimes I think it's because we try to explain it in a way that's too technical.
Yes.
We need more budget because, the savings plan is there, but, we have spikes and we're going to do on-demand. They're like, I don't think so. I don't even know what that means.
I don't care.
Right? Versus trying to, this abstraction out of cloud principles and educating the teams downstream that are, again, non-technical. They're just doing their job as well. Their job is to protect the budget.
Yep.
And this is what happened. This is what's happening. And then almost like framing whether it's a good or a bad thing, right? The cost alone in absolute value went up, but we're in front of TechCrunch. We have triple the daily active users over the weekend that we ever did. And the price to serve, we had done the homework, is gone down because economies of scale. Great.
Usual.
Amazing.
That's absolutely amazing.
Right? And I feel like when we describe that, people are like, of course I want that.
Yes.
And where does it break in enterprises? Well, we're still talking about unit cost as a nice to have,
yes,
and not a mandatory thing that you must think about ahead of time. Right? Again, what is unit cost? It's just division. Take a number divided by n that you care about, and then you have a number. It's a ratio. And yet you go to, especially when you have different product teams, you have internal dev tooling, you have X, Y, and Z. I remember when I was at my previous employer talking about unit price to internal dev tools. They're like, dude, what is a unit? We have no clue. Is it per onboarded? Is it X? So oftentimes I think there's this like rose-colored glasses when it comes to unit pricing, that the reality is much more complex. Yes. And it might be that the internal pricing has to be something a little bit more abstract. It might be the number of applications that are onboarded to public cloud for the centralized team. That is the number that we're tracking against. And the more apps that are onboard, this core cost that we have, that's shared amongst everyone, that should be going down. And that's what we're going to report on as well. That is a unit of measurement that my centralized team should care about. And not that the number itself is fluctuating up and down. That should be almost secondary.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. I agree. But if you think, first of all, I want to go back to second in this again, the top down, because I'm thinking about it a lot. But I think we should go back to speaking English, or better, whatever the language of the company. You should be able to articulate whatever you are presenting to your C-suite or your exec or your leadership in English, so that they can understand it. So if you are using even technical terms, they should go out.
Right.
You should be able to explain it from the business perspective. And that's the job of the FinOps person. And then you go down and you still use English to talk with the devs, with the engineers. Because as you correctly said, there are so many tools. If you're in a big company, you might have hundreds, if not thousands of teams. Each team might use different approaches to things, but you want to tell them overall, everything needs to be encrypted with our own keys.
Right.
That's English. How you're going to do that, I don't care. I really don't. But just make sure it happens. So I think there is a bit which is, let's start by using English and making sure that people in front of us understand, because I think that's a big chunk of what FinOps needs to do. Continuing with your idea also, it's with FinOps evolving And with, let's use AI into this mix, because we need to say the word at least a couple of times into every podcast. FinOps is going to change. There are lots of questions that are resolved today by tools that might be presented directly, or you can just ask for them, or you can just create things. I do see pieces of FinOps going into the different departments. A piece of FinOps of what we do going to procurement or the negotiation bit. It should potentially not even be ever in the FinOps person department. Yeah. This is pure procurement. Every 3 years, they're going to negotiate, they're going to come back to us for the numbers, and that's it. We will need to provide them with the graph that shows them that things are going in the right direction. That's for procurement, but we will have the same for finance, forecasting. Why aren't we using the forecasting system that are everywhere else in the company? Okay, FinOps is not the first entity that forecasts things.
Right.
Okay, so why aren't we using that? You said it before with governance, policies. Why aren't we using what exists there? We need to start a little more from a humility perspective also, as FinOps practitioners. The finance been there for 5,000 years. They've done it. Okay, whatever number, whatever format, angle you want to present it, it exists. It's been discussed. So maybe there is a lot of learning from our perspective. So we should specialize as being that bridge that helps different elements speaking different languages. We as FinOps practitioners need to start speaking different languages, but at the same time, finding ways to push some of our job to them. Yeah, I speak to you in the right way, but you do your job, because a procurement person will fight for how they negotiate the contract probably better than you would.
Absolutely.
And they know that, that's the maximum. We've done all the tricks in the because I have the list of the tricks. That's my job. And so I see FinOps evolving into pieces being distributed into different departments, and the person, the core that's going to stay there is going to be that trusted person, but trusted not by, I would say, the engineers in this case, trusted by the leadership, so that, yes, we are doing everything we can to follow the strategy, or if the strategy has changed, to adapt to the change of the strategy, and it is done correctly, and everyone's understanding what's happening there in the technical world, really as an intermediary. And then it matches way more, which is my way to make it work with a hammer, with the new definition of FinOps from the foundation, which is about tech value.
Right.
We still don't know what IT value is. Seriously, we've worked on it lots. Some people will tell you might disagree, and I would love to hear that.
Sure.
But the idea is that we still struggle with the ROI. Do I have enough servers? I know I need servers. I don't know how many I really need. And in the cloud, you might be closer to that. And I think FinOps is currently the best approach, driving towards defining the value of IT in a, let's say, formalized or useful way than any other thing before.
I think pragmatically speaking, if you take a core FinOps team, the leader of that team, you're absolutely right. It's almost you're one of your key priorities that is often overlooked. You're the translator in chief, right? Your job is to understand these concepts that not only cloud, not only how cost is allocated and blah blah blah, the configuration, but what you really need to be able to do is articulate why and what is important to relevant teams that are not engineering.
Yes.
Right? Talking to procurement, almost like, you almost have to interview them as well. Like you talk about humility of, it's not just, I will give you this data, and if you don't get it, you're the one who has to figure it out. If someone is talking about COGS and you're like, yeah, but the unit price is blah, you're talking about the same thing.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be this like translation level, or I think this is why also there's a level of convergence we're describing now of ITAM, IT asset management, and FinOps, and figuring out, well, how does this intersect together? For the best dashboard that you can say, I can show you from a bird's eye view the total cost all the way down to per minute, right? At a certain level, you're like, that's great, but what about the rest of it? Right? It's still a dollar is a dollar is a dollar. It doesn't really matter whether it's coming from, it's going to AWS, it's going to Snowflake, or it's going towards my building office, right? I still have to worry about it. And I think this understanding of the paradigm shift of a FinOps centralized team, and again, especially in a large institution, they have to be able to do a roadshow of understanding not only what are the information that you care about, when do you need it, right? Procurement should probably start thinking about it 8 months in advance, and you should understand from them what do they need from you. So it's not a fire drill, right? Oftentimes I feel like the work of the centralized FinOps team, and becomes very last second request. We're going to renegotiate. So can you come and give me data? You're like, I can't decide that. I have no clue. I have to go talk to these 5 teams.
Yes.
Right. You talk to the CTO and he says, hey, how do I now put this in relation to everything else? You're like, I don't have access to those systems. Right. So I think especially like doing these types of interviews also gives you a lot of buy-in to say, can we pull in the FinOps guy into the room when we're making these decisions instead of being the last second person to say, hey, focus on optimization. If you want to be in the room when we're deciding architecture or product roadmaps and everything, because you provide value from a different lens, well, they have to know what you actually do.
Yes.
Right? They have to understand the value you can provide in those meetings. That is not just, hey, lower my cost.
Yes.
Right. So I feel like we're a victim of our own success sometimes. That, of course, the biggest win you can have is I joined a FinOps or team in the FinOps team, and I was able to lower the bill. Everyone loves it. But what about all the other things that you're helping with? They might not be quantifiable, but it's a lot of advisory that you should be able to do at the higher levels. And if the teams don't know about, your existence or your team's existence outside of, that's a team that, figured out how to allocate costs and we do show back. And they don't realize that we should pull this individual in the room because they will provide us insights. And most importantly, they will speak our language.
Yes.
So there's no translation game of everyone else is looking at each other like, I have no idea what this guy said. Can someone translate for me? You should be the translator in chief there.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to say when the more on this conversation, the more I think about, we say that, the part of the goal is to reduce the cost of cloud. That's normally a procurement thing.
Right.
So is that the bit that we should completely even, as we say, the non-technical, the rate optimization should probably be completely delegated with the tools, building the tools for procurement,
right?
For example. But and I also wanted to touch one point, which is when you are the FinOps person, the FinOps lead, you need to be the translator. You also need to go and understand what is driving the other teams. And I'm thinking, I remember participating in RFPs, where the procurement team was receiving bonuses depending on the discount they would get from the list price.
Right.
Which is then you go to some of the big, absolutely massive database companies in this world, and they would have a 90% discount. Right. Would you prefer these ones to the cheapest one that give you 10% discount? Yes.
Absolutely.
Because that's what I'm getting. So one of the things of that translator in chief is also to translate the drivers, because everyone is trying to do the best for the company, but also for themselves, because it's the company setting the standards of how I'm going to measure your work. I want to do good work, so if the company is working well, they've set the right standards, so I'm going to follow these standards. It's your job as FinOps practitioners to go and talk with all your peers,
right,
to understand how do you get the bonus. I can tell you that's a question you always ask when you talk with salespeople. How do you get rewarded? Oh, every time someone buys using channel B and not channel
right.
A, I get 100 quid on top. I say, okay, I'm going to go with channel B for you.
Right.
So that's part of the translation. It's not just translation or being useful. It's also being able to put yourself in their shoes and think, if that was coming to me as that person or that role, what would I do? And I think that's, again, it goes with humility. It's going the fact of taking the time to understand them and validating what you just said. But at that point, you will be able to be proactive because you understand how they're going to react in advance. And so your scenario is not just throwing numbers. It is more about, I've built this to help you.
Right.
And I think that would be much more valuable. So it goes with everything you said, also with the translation. But we really need also to get that data out. Ages ago, someone asked me what is the word I dislike the most in cloud. And it was reserved instance, because it's not reserved, it's not an instance.
Right.
It's a contract.
Right.
It's a forward contract, so stop it. And so we've been so shaped to think that cloud is purely technical that as FinOps, I think that's the bit. We need to expand our eyes and say, no, there are chunks which are purely financial, there are chunks which are purely procurement, there are chunks which are even communication, all English, just English, all these things we need to start thinking about. If we want to go up, you need to communicate first. That's the big thing you need.
And it's funny, like the mandate for the leader for FinOps, and obviously when you're really small, it may not matter as much, But anytime you have organizational complexity, this understanding that your job is also to give the right data to the right people at the right time, but also knowing what the right data is, it's your responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. And then the story that comes along with it.
Really, really
right?
well said.
Like, what is the analysis of it, right? The right data to a procurement is very different than the right data to a product team, which is very different to engineers, which is very different on and on. And part of the good practice that I've seen work really well is the individuals who kind of understand that implicitly. And every time they're talking to a stakeholder, they're learning from them. What do you care about? My goal is to now give you this data faster than maybe once a year. If you can help procurement understand that we're going to go over the number, but this is why it's not a bad thing. But can we see if we can negotiate a discount up front? Right? If the procurement individuals understand that, you let them do their job better as well. There's a lack of agency, I think, for these other functions they feel in cloud that I signed the contract. I'd love, of course, my bread and butter in procurement is to help optimize it and get the lowest rate possible. But I'm only involved once every 3 years. And the assumption that from an engineering or FinOps person might be, well, you can only negotiate every 3 years. Procurement team, if they had known that, if you can give me the right data, which can help me pick up the phone, call my rep and change it, of course that we can do that. We're a company. Of course we can manage that. But I think this, unless you actually connect the two and you say, how do you think about cloud costs? You almost have to interview the individuals. I think that's where the foundation this year, now we're talking about shifting up. But I think that as a FinOps practitioner, you should know when you're speaking with finance, these are the terms. I think you brought up an excellent point of the RI versus forward contract, almost a data dictionary of when you think about X, this is what you should say to procurement. When you think about Y, this is what you should say to finance. Right? Because they'll get it and it'll make your life easier then.
I think we need new manuals in some form or way which are specific to a persona.
Right.
Is the manual of communicating with that role or that function, how they are, as we say, rewarded, how usually it works. Because really a procurement person, you give them the data of saying, hey, how the contract is built. You were talking about PPAs. They take the 6 previous months.
Right.
They can start working and checking the first 6 previous months all the time. You can always renew contracts. And they know it. We can break contract. They'll know the contract way better than you will ever know. And that's their job. And I think that'd be amazing because all of a sudden as FinOps, it's not your problem anymore. It's already renewed. They're just going to contact you and say, hey, by the way, we've managed to get another additional 0.5%. Okay, excellent. You should give credit, obviously, to the procurement department and not to yourself, but yes.
With that, I think we'll wrap up here.
Yes.
If there's one thing that you'd want to tell a centralized FinOps lead, right? I mean, for me, it's definitely going to be that, it sounds so easy and trivial to, just go talk to the individual stakeholders. But I think it's, when done well, you not only get buy-in from them, they also started realizing the power of FinOps that we in the community already understand. This level of disdain or, looking at it from, you guys are just optimization people, that really starts changing when you set the narrative ahead of time as well, right? And so I would really implore anyone who's kind of struggling in the place where they're not getting the buy-in, right? Be it executives, procurement, whatever. We'll talk to them and ask them, well, what does cloud mean for you? What is the data that could really help you do a better job for your team? And you as a centralized team should find a way to get them that data at the right time. And
if you can't get that data in a precise way, give trends. I think that's the thing. We always want to be very precise. You were talking about ratios earlier. And if you just pick 2 numbers, pick revenue per customer or revenue per cloud, per dollar spent on cloud. It's rough, it's ugly, yes, but it's enough to give you a start of an idea, give you trends. And I think that's probably precision is not what you need all the time. And as engineer, we love precision, but quite often, it's not what you really need to make decisions. If I were to take something out of all of this is, well, first of all, thank you. I loved it. But what I would say is the humility and really going to talk to people, having done some of your homework. Go to whatever training thing you have access to and do the basic training, the onboarding training for a procurement person, for a finance person. Start understanding how they see the world, and you will see that when you start talking to them and you propose solutions, you're not asking, oh, what would help you only, but you say, look, what would help you? But I think those 5 things would help you. Am I correct? And they might tell you, no, you're totally off the chart. Fine, but you've started a connection. So I think that's the main thing is put yourself not only in their shoes, but start doing some of their work, and you're going to be role play. You're going to be so much better.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Great conversation as always, Frank. Look forward to the next one.
Oh, yes, me too. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks.